Welcome everybody to the AEW Wrap-Up Show. We're here on the Turnbuckle Tavern. I'm Stephen ACEFIELD, the ace of the tavern, joined by the ratings wizard himself. Hawk, what's going on, man?
Oh, not a lot, man. Just enjoyed another episode of Dynamite.
Enjoying being the key verb here. We're going to get your thoughts in depth. You and I were talking off air a little bit about it, trying to hold back the opinions so we get them on air. But it's great to have you on here, man. It's great to see your face. You're getting the hang of the green screen. It's looking great, man.
Yeah, it's little lighting issues. I'm a little bit blown out a little bit, but it's coming. you know, production value comes step by step. It's tough to just get a grasp on it in one sitting. I'm learning.
You learned a lot from Young Rock so far. You've been doing a good job hanging out on set. They're teaching you well.
They don't let me on set, man. I'm in accounting. I wish.
All right, so we're going to get right into it and talk about what everybody wants to talk about. And the big thing we want to discuss is the culmination of the Moxley and Punk. I wouldn't say culmination, but we're there. We know what the main event of All Out will be. So let me get your thoughts on this. Do you think they tied it up in a bow? We are now getting CM Punk versus Moxley 2. Does it make sense to you, or does this feel forced like it has a couple weeks ago?
I think it's absolutely dumb how they did it. And I have a few first reason is I've said that AEW has a really bad issue of like doing something over and over again. And if people remember last year, we got Omega Cage at the All Out event last year, and they fought 2 weeks before the pay-per-view. And we got the same shit this year. You'd figure someone in creative, Tony Khan, would be like, we don't want to do that again this year. We did that last year. But no, they just do it. I don't know, man. It's like, it feels cheap to me, I guess, because I don't know. We're supposed to care after Punk just got smashed by Moxley. And the issue is either Punk wins or MJF's coming out and doing some shit. So it's like, I just don't see how Mox can walk away with the title at All Out. So you've almost, by doing it, you have a very predictable main event. Like, because if Mox comes out with the title, then it's just bad booking across the board. So they've kind of written themselves into a corner. I'm not saying All Out can't be good and they can't make something happen interesting at the end after the match, whatever. But all in all, I feel kind of cheated with the main event.
Yeah, I mean, so let's go from the beginning. Mox comes out. He noticeably got booed by Chicago, and that's expected. People were chanting for CM Punk. There was a smaller contingent chanting for Moxley, which shows how popular he's become during this run where he's been a dominant force. And you've mentioned on the flagship, there hasn't been anyone more dominant than Moxley all across wrestling. They've booked him really strong. They've made him look not just an interim champion. They've made him look like a real world's champion. He went out there and dominated Punk, like you mentioned. For me, I'm stuck on the same fact that it doesn't make sense for Punk. First of all, it's an open challenge. Why wasn't everybody clamoring for this? Why weren't guys like BRYAN DANIELSON, who's been at the back of the line since he got a shot at Hangman Page? Why is he not jumping up at the opportunity to get the world title shot? Why is Punk allowed back to get there? That's okay, we can suspend belief for that. But now I'm supposed to expect his ankle, his foot, whatever it is completely fine, and he's going to be expected to beat Moxley after he's been dominant for upwards of 6 months now. I know that people are going to be happy and they're going to leave the building happy, and I'll be one of them. I'm there. I'm hoping for a good match. But to be where we were, we actually got a clean finish. It wasn't that it was unclean. It wasn't like there was DQ, there was Gaga, shenanigans, none of that. We actually got Moxley going over Punk. So for Punk to be back in this position as the number one contender, it makes a mockery of the rankings, which we've already known. The rankings don't mean anything.
It's true.
But now we also have the believability factor. Can Punk beat Moxley, and how are they going to do it in a believable way? Is it going to be the GTS? Is that really what's going to be putting Moxley out? I'd have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, that's why the only thing that makes sense, and I think I've only heard this from BELCASTER, maybe it's an actual rumor now, is the whole MJF Punk joining forces. Like, that is literally the only thing that makes sense now for that match. But yeah, and in general, and I've said this, and I mean it, I'm not even just saying it to be a contrarian dick. Like, I'm just not that impressed with Punk. I only know Punk from his AEW run. I don't know his his WWE shit. I went back and watched the Pipe Bomb and went back and watched a couple of his supposedly best WWE work, whatever. And in general, like, I don't know, I'm just not a huge Punk guy. So for him to get squashed like that by Mox and then come back and be the main event at All Out, to me, I would rather have a main event at All Out with maybe a mid-card guy, but with a better story leading up to it, than a main eventer, but with like zero story, or a story that doesn't make sense. They tried, it just doesn't make sense to me, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we're leading a little bit on this being a shoot, the stuff with Punk in the back and being angry at his booking or the Colt Cabana situation, whatever you want. Because I think if they were booking it the way they wanted to, you'd have done this mock squash 4 or 5 weeks ago, given some time for Punk to build himself back up, have some squash matches and wins of his own, to build himself back up to Moxley. We're 2 weeks removed from Moxley absolutely wiping the floor with him, and now we're expected for him to go out there and have a 25, 30-minute, 40-minute classic with this guy. I don't know, man. There's a lack of believability, and that's my problem with it.
No, I 100% agree with that. Because, I mean, we all know what wrestling is, but at the same time, the best storylines, you buy in. You don't think about it, you know? And it's just like a bad movie, like the plot holes in bad movies. You know, like, you don't think about the plot holes in Back to the Future because it's a great movie. But if you're watching a shitty movie, every plot hole just sticks out. And that's kind of like wrestling storylines. Like, as long as it's good and compelling, you're in it. You don't really care. But it's when it's just bad, like you see, I don't know, man.
No, you're making a good point. I think you're willing to forgive some things if the action's there and the story is enough to keep you entertained. This story's been, I use the word disjointed. It hasn't had a cohesion, which makes me believe that Tony Khan's just trying to make the best of a bad situation, which there's a lot of realism. I think there's a lot of talent that's been upset. And let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's a rumor going around the internet, not confirmed, but there was news that dropped on Twitter. And again, I'm not confirming this. There's no confirmation from Sean Ross Sapp, no Fightful, no, but Dave Meltzer didn't say it. There's rumors that Malachi Black has requested a release and it was granted, which would explain how he's been being booked. He was the one that got pinned on Rampage where House of Black lost. We all were texting in the group chat. How could you have Dark Order not only pin and beat Dark Order, I mean, the House of Black, but Malachi takes the pin? Made no sense. So I think there might be some truth to that rumor.
I've been saying that for 6 months. Like, I just can't believe the way AEW's treated Malachi Black, because since day one, his very first episode, I'm like, this is an interesting character, because the lights went down, pops up, it's the Cody match. He pops up and it's him and Cody. And it looked like they were going to push him, and then, man, they wouldn't. I don't know what it was, but AEW is just like, fuck Malachi Black. And then they form the House of Black and bring in the new guys. And even then, it's like I almost felt like they were pushing the other guys in House of Black more than Malachi Black. And it's kind of mind-bending to me, because he's one of the best guys on the roster. Just look-wise, personality-wise, he has the in-ring chops. I don't know. I think he was fucking great, but you wouldn't know it because they just put him on the back burner inexplicably. But AEW's had a bad problem with that in general, is putting a lot of guys, they'll push them and then stop pushing. Like, for instance, like, if you remember, like 2 months ago, Kyle O'Reilly had this huge push, and then they just stopped, and I didn't like that. I don't think he deserved it, but he got it. And it's like, what's the point of doing that if you're just going to fucking, like, not continue on with it? Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah, so Chad's in the chat here. Says Malachi's story came from a Dave Meltzer parody account. I did see that, but there were other people chiming in. Again, not confirming it. I just wanted to bring the point of conjecture in this conversation to Hawk. We've been talking about the talent that's being misused, and there's been notable personalities that have been unhappy with the way they've been presented. Wouldn't shock me, even though this may not be true. This may be just a false parody account tweeting this, but at the same time, I wouldn't blame a lot of guys for being upset with the way they've been presented, because it's just absolutely, to me, there's a lot more of story that can be told with a guy like Malachi Black, as you mentioned. I know you mentioned he wasn't on TV, but he was hurt for a bit. But that's another issue as well. Some of these guys with these injuries, it's just like, either disclose the injury or find a way to make sure these guys stay healthy, because it's sort of like an epidemic at this point with all these injuries that happen. Whether it be Bryan Danielson, Miro was hurt, Adam Cole is hurt right now. Kenny Omega is a long-term coming, but like in the immediate, some of these guys who just brought in, guys that have been relatively healthy their whole career, have been hurt. So I don't know. There's some story to that.
Yeah, but you could also, people that are hurt, get them on the mic, get them in storyline. I remember when I first came in, Britt Baker was hurt, and they brought her out every single fucking night on, that little fucking, like, people would like carry her out on, I don't know what they call it, not a stretcher, but the
Oh, it's like thing. A wheelchair gurney thing. They were
gurney, like a gurney type thing. Anyway, she was out there, and I had never seen her wrestle. I only knew her as the hurt wrestler when I was watching. So there's ways to get them on there. It's not like if you get hurt, you have to completely leave the show until you're ready to take a fall. Like, get out there, work the mic, do commentary for an episode. JR doesn't even show up till the second hour sometimes. Put him on commentary for the first hour. Like Punk, when he was injured, he went to Comic-Con. Fuck you, dude. Come to Dynamite. Cut promos. You don't need to be able to walk to get in the ring and cut a fucking promo. So the injury shit, I understand the not being able to be in ring, but I don't think injuries are a reason to completely go off Dynamite or leave the company while you rehab. I think that's kind of silly.
Yeah, some people say that Stone Cold Steve Austin got his most over was when he broke his neck in that match at SummerSlam against Owen Hart, and he couldn't wrestle. He just had to work on his time on the mic and work to get people to notice him without him wrestling, and it made him a better promo. It made him a better character. And once he was able to wrestle again, which was somehow by WrestleMania that year, which is insane to recover from a neck injury, but that's another story for another day, he used that platform to become the superstar we know. And I think Britt was a smaller microcosm of the same situation. She didn't become the uber star that Stone Cold did, but it definitely got her more over, to your point. She absolutely became a better character working on it, getting screen time when she couldn't wrestle. And I think it made her a better champion when she eventually won the belt.
Part of major pushes is them seeing you week in and week out. And that's why I think a lot of people are disappointed with AEW right now, because even the people they're pushing, it's like, if you see them on Dynamite, you're not seeing them for 2 more weeks, pretty much. They're going to skip a week, and they're going to come back. And I think that has a lot to do with adding too much talent to the roster. I get it. I've heard that Ring of Honor is going to take some of the roster, but they haven't yet. So right now, you got bad storytelling because you're trying to keep everybody happy. But at the same time, there's still rumors that the locker room's unhappy. So you may as well make more people unhappy and tell good stories, I guess.
So we have Chad.
I don't know. Have a lot of advice for him, I guess, except, tell better stories.
Yeah, I mean, and Chad has some advice here. He said they need to cut 20 to 30 wrestlers and focus on a core group. Malachi should be their taker, a top heel in the main event scene. Let's start with the first part of that. I think they could get away with cutting 20 to 30 wrestlers and be okay. And by like snapping up all this talent and having all these guys to use, is so many mouths to feed, so much and so little time to go around. I agree with you, Hawk. You nailed it. You need to have the same recurring characters on a weekly basis. I was listening to Lance Storm's podcast on F4W Online, and he's booking Impact right now, and he gives advice. He's worked as an agent in WWE. He's obviously been a wrestler for 20 plus years, so he knows a little bit about the business. He talked about and compared it to a TV show. If this was your favorite TV show and you tuned in to see Walter White for Breaking Bad, and you wanted to see Mike Ehrmantraut, or you wanted to see Gus Fring, and they just happen to be once every 4 weeks you see them, you get really frustrated. There were some episodes of Breaking Bad, and the worst ones were when they were focusing on Skyler, or when they were focusing on the side plot of, like, what was the son's name that likes breakfast? Like, all that stuff. We want to see Walter White. Give us those guys on a weekly basis. Tell the main stories.
But even with the Malachi Black things, it's different, because at least Breaking Bad gave you Walter White to a point like you need him. Like, they haven't even done that for Malachi Black. Like, they haven't. I mean, there's somewhat like Chad knows, and we're talking about like Malachi. We know the talent that Malachi has, but I can see how some people just don't even get it because he just shows up and then disappears. So that's at least create the urge for Malachi, but they're not even really creating the urge. I always talk about him because it's more of a frustration that we're not seeing him than like I want to see him. It's like I'm so frustrated because they're not even trying, and it's right there in front of them. All the while they're pushing people that personally I don't give a shit about. I know some people like Daniel Garcia. I know people like him. It's fine. I'm indifferent. Kyle O'Reilly, I'm indifferent. Dante Martin, I'm indifferent. And they're all kind of the same guy to me in a way. And then you have Malachi Black, who's a completely different personality and look than anything else you have on the roster. And like Chad was saying, make him like the Undertaker, like a guy, like your dark, ominous, brooding figure. The lights come out when he comes, and then he comes in and shows up. You can do so much with that. And again, if they were putting better people on than Malachi Black, I'd be like, okay, they'll get to him. But the fact that they're like tonight, man, the Wingmen, and I actually like the Wingmen. I don't mind them being on Dark. I don't watch Dark. I wouldn't mind them pushing them not on a go-home show before their biggest I guess All Out's like their WrestleMania, maybe. I don't know. Double or Nothing might be. I don't know.
Yeah,
but then you have the Wingmen, who you haven't been on Dynamite this whole cycle. I think this is literally the first time they've been on Dynamite between Double or Nothing and All Out. Like, really, tonight on the go-home show, when you haven't told much story, you have one more episode to fucking do something, and it's just, why? Why tonight?
Well, they used it to bring W. Morrissey out, and he looked like $1 million. But again, he's another guy in the roster. Why? We don't have space for a guy like that. And as talented as he is, and tall as he is, and impressive as he might look, we have a roster problem. It's bloated. We already have too much talent. The undercard's already full. So you mentioned a little bit, and I want to just touch on the younger talent, like a Daniel Garcia, Dante Martin, the Wheeler Yuta, those guys. They may not pop a rating right now, but they're planting seeds for these guys, which I do appreciate for a Daniel Garcia to eventually down the line be able to draw. And you're going to be sacrificing a rating in the near right now, that it's not going to make people want to tune in all the time, but you have to get people interested and get familiar with these characters. So I do appreciate the Daniel Garcia stuff, but I agree with your frustration as a fan. Your opinion and your perspective is valid because you are a casual fan. Self-admittedly, you have been someone who's only been watching AEW. So I think there's a lot of people that are watching through your eyes. Us as diehards, we know we can see who Daniel Garcia reminds us of. Like, we see some of the Bret Hart stuff and the Chris Benoit stuff through these young wrestlers. But for you, he's just a guy in tights that looks similar to these other guys in tights that are doing the same thing. So I do think your perspective is very valid. And I know that on the flagship that people like to rip on you and the Call to Hawk segment. Your perspective is the majority most of the time. Pro wrestling fans sometimes tune in and out and they don't know exactly what we know that are sitting here for an hour and a half on a weekly basis discussing the show they just watched.
Yeah, and the big thing is, like, what's it, W. Morrissey, is that his name?
Yeah, formerly Big Cass of WWE.
That's my point. So you know these people from like WWE or whether it be Impact, New Japan, the Chads, but all know all these. So those are more oh shit moments for people like you. But if you're trying to build a brand, you have to assume that your audience is kind of dumb on that. You know, like, you can't assume that I'm going to pop, like a casual fan's not going to pop for him because I don't know who the fuck he is. It was all these people they enter, even Adam Cole and BRYAN DANIELSON. Like, I took the Chad's word that was a big deal. To me, it wasn't. I wasn't like, oh man, Adam Cole. Like, okay. So that's, AEW needs to think about that. They're like, oh yeah, we can have the Forbidden Door pay-per-view and build it, but those Dynamites leading up to the Forbidden Door, that was prime storytelling for All Out. But they were telling the Forbidden Door story, and I didn't know any of the fucking characters, and that's when I took my European vacation, missed a couple episodes of Dynamite, went back and watched Dynamite, but still never watched Forbidden Door, and I don't feel like I missed anything. I didn't feel like there was any gaps in my knowledge of AEW because they had so many wrestlers from New Japan on that month leading up to Forbidden Door that I could miss it.
Well, you have my BR Live login if you'd like to use it. It's the open door policy for the Forbidden Door if you'd like to check it out. But
I might.
I mean, you're spitting some facts, Hawk. I appreciate you here on the Tavern, and you may have different opinions, but that's why we welcome all different opinions here because it makes good conversation. So let's talk about the next match here, and I thought it was a really good match for what it was. Bryan Danielson defeating Jake Hager. This match went pretty long. Obviously, we saw some of the stuff going on with Daniel Garcia, Chris Jericho getting involved. At the end of it, we saw Claudio and Wheeler come out to make the save. What was your opinion on this match, and are you impressed with a guy like Jake Hager? Because I'm not personally. Bryan Danielson's my guy. I know they're building towards Jericho, but I was impressed with Hager here, but usually I could do without him.
I actually like Hager. He's been one of the guys I liked from the beginning, but only because when I first came in, the running joke was like, nobody has wrestling bodies anymore. Everyone's kind of smaller. But Jake Hager was one of the guys on the roster who was a bigger bruiser, so I've always kind of been a Hager guy. But I think I heard him say tonight that was only Hager's 5th singles match in AEW.
That's wild. I didn't hear that, but I didn't hear it personally, but that would make sense. I mean, I can only think of a few off the top of my head. And
he came down to Jericho's music. He doesn't even have his own music. I mean, Jericho is with him, but it's like it's Hager's match, not Jericho's match. So Hager doesn't. They don't even give Hager his own entrance theme.
He has his own theme. I'm curious why they had him come out to Judas. Maybe because they wanted Jericho.
Well,
he does have his own theme, though.
Went to commentary.
I guess,
at the same
yeah.
time Hager was coming down to the ring is probably why they did it, and they just love to play Judas. I think it's fucking overplayed as fuck. And I wouldn't be angry if Jericho changed his theme music. But it's things like Hager. I like Hager. I understand why people would be like, whatever, because they've kind of treated him whatever. He's been Jericho's guy. He's never forged his own way at all. He's always been in a side story. You always see him in like Stadium Stampede or Anarchy in the Arena and all those big like 10-way match where you got two factions warring against each other. That's where Hager's always at. So that's why you don't care about him, because they haven't really pushed him, but they keep him around. So
he's a guy that Jim Ross absolutely loves. He's from Oklahoma. He's an amateur wrestler. Now he's an MMA guy. So he brings a legit tough guy thing to AEW, which I do appreciate. Just to me, it's the lisp on the promo. It's just the presence. His small little tiny legs bother me, but Bryan Danielson got a good match out of him. So I'm going to ask you here about this match of Bryan Danielson and Chris Jericho. They're advertising it as a dream match. This match has happened back in the day, but it was on like a SmackDown or a Raw back in the day, which doesn't count. These are two different iterations of the character. This is the American Dragon. This is the Lionheart. First time it's happening here in a big stage on pay-per-view. Is this one of the matches you're looking forward to most? And if not, what could they have done better with Danielson and or Jericho?
So the pay-per-views are weird. Like, I'm not huge on the card. Like seeing it beforehand, I'm like, whatever. They're always a blast when you go, So the match is going to be fun and the crowd's going to be into it. But do I give a shit about it? Not really, I guess. I'm trying to even think about the story leading up to it. I'm trying to think of the major plot points that led to it, and I'm an idiot and I have no retention, but like I can't remember any big things taking place to even lead to this match. This has been the BCC versus the JAS, the blood feud between the two factions. Bryan Danielson was put out by Jericho as a shoot. His injury came from that War Games match or the Blood and Guts match. Yeah. I forgot about that.
But that's been happening for a bit. They've been on and off. So I know Eddie Kingston was involved, and so they've been feuding, but not feuding, because it mostly was Moxley at the head of it with Jericho. Obviously, they wrestled for the championship, so they've been feuding in proximity to each other. But you're right, it isn't this like crazy feud that's been building for a very long time. It's been on and off, sort of like what they've been doing with all the different momentum-based wrestlers, where they've been putting them on the burner and then taking them off, making them cold. Put them on the burner and taking them off and making them cold.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why, again, when you ask me, like, do I care? Like, am I looking forward to the match? No. Is it going to be a good match? Probably. It's going to be great, entertaining, fun time at All Out. But I'm not really stoked for any of the matches. Honestly, I don't think there's not one match that I give a shit about going into. And I'm not saying it's a bad card or it's going to be a shitty pay-per-view. I'm just saying I don't care about it because of the storytelling leading up to it, I guess.
That's fair, and I understand that. Do I bother even asking about the women's match? Should I just gloss over it here, or am I going to get contrarian views that will get us canceled here on the Turnbuckle Tavern?
To be real, like, I'm not a fan of women's wrestling. I haven't hidden that fact. But I do bring it up, like, a part of that is AEW's fault, because I feel with the women's division, it's like you need to do one of two things, which is either completely get rid of it, which I know they're not going to do, and that's very unpopular. They shouldn't. Or pay more attention to it. Because what they're doing now is it feels like it's just a wait. Like they feel like, oh, we got to put the women in. Let's give them 20 minutes on Dynamite, not even maybe 15 minutes on Dynamite, and then that's it. It's like you can't make people give a shit with as little time as they pay to it. So, and again, that goes back to a point I make on the flagship all the time. Like you said, Malachi Black got pinned on Rampage. I didn't even know that. Because I don't watch Rampage, because I don't give a shit. They don't make it imperative to watch it. They need, and so if you would start making people have to watch Rampage, like make it part of the storytelling, you could do more women's wrestling. You could feature more women, and you could tell more in-depth storylines. You could build women factions. I think that's a big, like, you have women that like pair together, like Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter, but you don't form like these real factions, like the Blackpool Combat Club, Jericho Appreciation Society. That's how they feature so many dudes, because you get like war games where you have 10 people fighting at the same time. With the women's wrestlers, they don't do that.
Sounds like you'd like the WWE women's division. They built some factions up for you, so maybe you tune on Monday Night on Raw. Check that out.
I'm not saying I'd like it. I'm saying that's what AEW needs to do if they want to build up the women's wrestling.
So the thing I'll say about this match is that Thunder Rosa being injured, whether it's a shoot or a work, whatever, doesn't matter. The title is off her. She's the interim champion. This is the shot in the arm the division needs, in my opinion, to get the title off her and start fresh with somebody different, whether it be Toni Storm, Sheeta, Britt Baker, or Toni Storm. The Fatal 4-Way match should be absolutely good. And I go back to the days where Sheeta was champion, and she may not pop a rating and make people like really excited, I guess, to see her, but she was a really good champion, and she was a fighting champion. She was on the show every single week wrestling. That's not something we see from Thunder Rosa. So, I don't know. I thought Thunder was buried on Dynamite last week with that promo by Britt Baker with saying, I wrestled hurt. And I know it's not apples, and it's not comparing apples and apples. It's apples oranges with a finger injury and the knee injury. I think that's what Thunder's battling. So two different things. But I mean, to me, I know they got real life heat. That was a little bit of a low blow in my opinion.
Maybe. Again, Thunder Rosa, I actually like Britt Baker, but I've never really cared about Thunder Rosa. And she's another one of and it's the equivalent of like what they do in the guys division. They bring someone in who wasn't with the company, and then all of a sudden they push them to the top out of nowhere. Like Thunder Rosa, I remember she would come over and wrestle because she was the champion.
She was the NWA Women's Champion.
NWA Women's Champion. So she'd show up on Dynamite, and it was a big deal because there was crossovers. That's when the Forbidden Door was starting to open or whatever. And then they made her full-time, and she came over and became champion fairly quickly, which I'm just, and this obviously isn't how wrestling works, so I don't know where I got this idea at. I just think that you need to put in your time, pay your dues. And I'm not talking about with like a different company and then coming over. Like if you put in your time at WWE and then you come over to AEW, it's like, I'm not saying you can't be a top guy, but I don't think you should rise as fast as people who've been with the company, who they've been building. Like to me personally, I don't think like Punk's a bigger draw than Hangman. I prefer Hangman to Punk, but as soon as Punk got here, because Hangman won the title. No, he won the title like 2 months after Punk came, right? He won the title
November 2021, yeah.
In November. So it's like, and his title run was like, man, you don't even remember it. Like, I can't think of one title defense that was memorable for Page. And it's because they just kept pushing Bryan Danielson. See him during Page's title run. They were pushing all these new guys. And it's almost like he became an afterthought. And so that's how the women's division went too when Thunder Rosa came over. She just rose to the top out of nowhere. And I mean, I don't have any people on my list that I would push more, I guess, than Thunder Rosa, just because I don't care for the division. But it just seems like you should have to put in your time before you just get that push.
Well, I understand where you're coming from for sure. Like, I'm coming from the perspective of watching Thunder wrestle in GCW and seeing like the deathmatch style she was wrestling, and then NWA, the work she was putting in. So her coming in for me as the fan that's consuming all the outlets, she came in with a lot of stock built up. But I understand from your end, I mean, the stock she built up. Do you remember the match she had on St. Patrick's Day Slam where she beat Britt Baker in that bloody lights out match? Do you remember that match from 2020? It was the pandemic era.
I do remember that, yeah.
So that, to me, that was she became an uncrowned champion. I thought the story progressed to the point where maybe she should have won the title on the pay-per-view. They waited to they were in her hometown in the cage, and then after that, everything fell off a cliff. It became absolutely horrendous, and it might be a little bit of Thunder's fault. It might be the booking's fault. It might be a combination of both. But what happened with the women's division, same thing with the tag titles and the TNT championship. I don't think it's a coincidence that everything sort of fell to shit when the booking became disjointed and non-cohesive. So the talent can only do so much. And I know Thunder, the chats talk about top of the ramp shit and the booking. She can't cut a promo for the life of her, and I think that sort of cut her legs out. And they were like, she may never get another run here in AEW, never mind another major promotion. And I love Thunder in the ring, but they gave her every shot to get over and keep it going. But listen, man, I think writing's on the wall, put the title back on Britt and go with her, because it's like, you knew what worked. That's when the women's division was at its best, when she was at the top.
Well, and with the women's division, how much longer can you push Jade without putting the belt on her?
It's a good point.
She's undefeated. Like, how long can she go undefeated before they're like, all right, it's a title shot? Obviously, they're purposely keeping her out of those feuds to save her, but eventually, you just got to put the belt on her, because she's obviously the biggest draw in the women's division. So and I don't think we've seen her. Is she injured too? I don't remember seeing her in the last couple of weeks.
She's been on Rampage a bit, and she's also feuding with Athena, so she'll be defending the title against Athena at All Out. We'll preview the card in a little bit, guys, so we'll preview every match. But they're in a weird spot with her, because she has their mid-card title. In order to push her to the main event, she needs to lose that mid-card championship, and I guess they could pull the card and say, listen, she's stripped of the title, she's going for the main event, she never has to lose. But I think that's a cheap way out. And she eventually has to lose. It becomes one of those things where it backs you to a corner storytelling-wise when you have a guy or a woman that's undefeated. We see it with BRYAN DANIELSON when he was undefeated. Goldberg back in the day. Like, you only can do so much with an undefeated streak. You need to do something a little bit better than that.
Yeah, but if Jade's not undefeated, I think she's just kind of another women's rep. Like, her main draw right now is that she's undefeated.
It's a good point. But for you, if you're you're Hawk in the back, you're booking Dynamite, how are you getting the title off of Jade and having her go for the world title?
I don't know. It's tough, because it's like, when she's going for the world title, she's probably still going to be undefeated, but she will have the TV title, so she has to lose that. But at the same time, like, if she loses a match, just a TV title match, then you've lost I don't know. I'm not. The Chads give me shit for not having alternative ideas, but it's like, I don't sit down and think about how I would book AEW. Sometimes I do, but for the most part, I can just pinpoint whether they're doing it poorly or doing it well. If it was my job, and I would seriously think about it, I don't know. But I don't know how you have Jade lose the TV title and still make her relevant for being the champion. But I do agree that, and it's happening with Mox. I mean, he's lost, but they've just, at some point, you just build up someone too much to where they become this invincible, like, unstoppable force. And eventually, you got to put an end to it. Because I think it's gotten laughable after the Punk thing. That was too much for me with Mox being invincible. And Jade, I don't care as much, because, like I said, they don't put women on the TV that often.
So great transition to the CM Punk thing. So he comes down to the ring. He comes down downtrodden. He looked tired, and he talked about getting beat up in Cleveland. Talked about that, even though he did get hurt during the match, his foot is 100%, but he wasn't sure if he's ready. Then he gets a pep talk from Ace Steel, who's the guy who trained him. He was the guy who picked up the contract after that Mox promo, which, again, kayfabe, why doesn't make any sense? Why is everyone not running out of the back to grab that contract? It's like, makes no sense. Does anybody have aspirations here in the company? Nobody wants a world title shot, goddammit. Ace Steel picks it up. He's the guy in the back. He's a producer. So
I know, at least have Punk come out and grab it and let the crowd pop something. And it was and like, you knew who the fuck he was. I didn't know who the fuck he was. This is some doo-wop coming down and picking up the contract. And like, I think the commentators may have said something, but if I was at the Dynamite, I wouldn't have fucking known. I would have thought it was just some dude in the back like coming to get a piece of paper out of the ring so they could get the next match started.
So Steele cut a pretty damn good promo. And they let him drop an F-bomb. Mox didn't drop an F-bomb on the opening promo, but they let Ace Steel cut a promo and said maybe they didn't know he was going to do it because he was just so fired up. He slaps Punk in the face, gets him fired up, and Punk goes through the crowd and cuts a pretty fucking awesome promo. So this got me fired up, suspending some belief that like Chicago's this I guess extra fuel he needs to get going, to get him motivated and be his superhuman strength. That's the only reason you can like realistically tie this together. But I did enjoy that they had Mox and also Punk separated in 3 different segments throughout the show. It wasn't just done anchored at the front where you just forget about it. It was immersed throughout the whole show where Mox came out, then Punk came out, then Mox came out again. So it actually had this very immersive type of storytelling that AEW hasn't been doing a lot. We've seen it with the brawl they had. This week they did it, and it felt important because it's your world title. The main event wasn't announced. There needed to be a lot of build in one night.
I agree, and I'm totally for that. Like someone being on the episode more than once, more than twice. Because a lot of times, what happens is when you're on, like if you show up early on the show, then you're done. Like you do your part, and then we don't see you the rest of the night. I'm totally for doing callbacks and people coming out and making other appearances, and it does help build the story because. I would be for like just 5 good storylines that do that. Like you get something at the beginning of the show and then they come back and then keep doing that instead of like instead of bringing the wingman out, bring somebody like have someone do their first segment and then they come back at the end. I don't know, something like that. I'm a fan. I like how they did it 2 weeks ago where they kind of spanned it the whole episode. And then tonight, I like that. I'm a fan of that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, to do a cheap plug for Shad Nostalgia, we're watching 1996 WCW, and this is what they're key at doing. And we're watching right now the episode that will air on Friday. I spoiler alert, I taped it by myself. BELCASTER is out in Chicago doing all-out things with all the crew. Yeah, so I was on there solo dolo, but we watched the last 2 episodes, August 26th and September 2nd. And September 2nd is key because they're building toward not only the main event at Fall Brawl, which is middle of the month, but also, they have the main event, the world title match for Halloween Havoc, which is over a month away. Signed, sealed, and delivered. It's going to happen. They're building towards it. Can you imagine if we had 2 months of build for any match in AEW? How much better it would be to feel it coming down the pike? Like if we had 2 months of build for Moxley and Punk, and I know injuries and drama in the back affected the way they were building. And of course, we'll get the story down the line 10 years from now, what really happened. But man, and you have from now until November to build full gear. We should know what the main event is sometime in the middle, so we have a decent amount of time to build towards it.
I'm with you. I mean, I think MJF's probably in the main event at Full Gear since he's not even going to be at All Out. If he is, it won't be in a match. It'll be, extracurriculars. So start building because MJF's good. A lot of the long-term storytelling they've done, whether it be him and Jericho, because they did the whole like he was going to join the Inner Circle, and then the whole Wardlow thing, which I'm on record saying it went on a bit too long, and the payoff was just MJF getting completely demolished. But anyway, they use him really good for long-term storytelling. So why not whatever starts it all out? Like that could be the feud that almost goes through till Full Gear.
Yeah, so I think the only chance we have of it making sense that he gets a title shot would be if he shows up and wrestles, because there is an empty spot in that ladder match. Mystery person, as we know, the Joker. Because, again, talking about realism in wrestling, I know it's wrestling. You mentioned, I think you put it perfectly. We all know what it is. So, we want to suspend belief. We know that at the end of the day it's scripted, and they're going to fit in whatever they want to fit it in. For me, for MJF to cut that promo, and I'm going to play the drop because it's on here, for him to cut that promo and be able to go right back in and waltz right into the main event, it doesn't make any sense. He has to earn it, and I think winning the casino ladder match would be the spot to do it.
You fucking mark! Fire me! Fire me!
But how does that make any sense? Tony Khan's the head booker of this company, and he waltzed back in and says, here's a world title shot? want to talk about starting from the bottom? There's no figurehead for him to feud with, so he has to just earn his way in. And that's the way you get him at Full Gear. Have him win the casino ladder match.
Well, first off, the Jokers are always a huge disappointment.
True. Brian Cage, I think about Double or Nothing 2020.
So that's not going to... The Joker, I never get excited for who the fuck that's going to be. And secondly, like, no, I think MJF's past being the Joker in the casino ladder. I think it's got to be... His return has to be interference in the main event or extracurricular after the main event. I think MJF closes all out. If they're doing it right. But I can also, because Tony Khan, he thinks, because I saw that quote today, like, oh, we're doing a little bit different. It's like, no, man, you're just doing it well. And it's like, I think he thinks he's better at booking than he really is. So he might try something like, oh, everyone thinks they're getting MJF at All Out, but I'll show them. We'll give them to him the week after or some bullshit. But in my opinion, they've already slow played MJF a little bit too long. I think he should have already been back and maybe a match at All Out, but I think he could have came back in the last few weeks to start causing some drama, or it's like mysterious things start happening. Who's behind it? I don't know, some bullshit. But I just think he's their biggest draw. He's probably the best person on the whole roster, and to keep him out the whole summer, we haven't seen him June, July. It'll be 3 full months before we see, and that's even if he comes back at All Out. And if it's not injury related, it makes zero sense why he's out that long, to me personally.
No, I mean, especially with the negotiations, we mentioned the television deal coming to the end, and they have to negotiate with these networks to get and stay on, whether it be TBS or TNT. It's not a guaranteed thing anymore. They have to bring something to the table, and they got Punk back. They got Danielson back. They're having their big guys come back. MJF is part of that. He's one of the biggest draws in the company, and why people tune in on a week-to-week basis. You mentioned storytelling. Think about the best stories that AEW has told in the past 3 years. MJF's been part of pretty much every single one of them, whether it be that Punk storyline with the dog collar match, or go with the Jericho storyline, even his feud with Mox for the title. Go back to that. Everything MJF touches is gold. They need him so desperately, and I think with him gone, that's when things sort of fell off a cliff. And whether you want to talk about the stuff, you're dying on the sword that this was a work and you were there to see it in person. You got your money back absolutely immediately at the autograph signing. But once that started, you're blurring the line of realism. Whether it's real or fake, it doesn't matter. At some point, it's insulting to the fans where it's like, we just want our guy back. Like, what's the reason that he's gone?
Yeah, and that's almost like Tony Khan masturbation in a way. It's like, I don't care what the fans want. I'm going to tell it the way I want it, and that's the way it's going to be. And I'll say this, when MJF was a no-show at FanFest, the crew handling FanFest, to me, was overly pissed off. And I remember mentioning it at the time, like, I think they're even in on it. I think they were told when MJF no-showed, like, hey, act really angry about this. So I 100% think it's a work. I don't think there's any real drama, because I think MJF is the guy where he's dictating his terms now to this point. I think he's one of the guys on the roster where he has the upper hand on Tony Khan, where it's like, yeah, you need me. And people are like, oh, this guy makes this much more than MJF, this guy. And it's like, I don't buy it. We don't know what MJF makes. I think he's probably top 5 paid on the roster. Personally, I just don't know how he isn't. And if he isn't, then there is real animosity. But again, Tony Khan knows that he's only one bad decision away from losing him, because the WWE is still there. And it's always still like, even people who have helped build AEW, MJF, all of these people, they all grew up watching WWE. They're all wrestlers because of WWE. So there's always that's always going to be a pull. Even if AEW's treated you well, paid you well, but WWE wants you, you're like, yeah, I think I got to. And I think Tony Khan knows that. And that's why I think MJF kind of has the run of the place in AEW.
Personally, I mean, WWE has time and heritage behind them. AEW is 3 years old. WWE's been in its form since about 1985, since WrestleMania 1. So we've had a lot of years, a lot of superstars, a lot of legacy that's passed on. And that stage of WrestleMania is well established as the biggest stage in wrestling history. You mentioned we weren't sure, is it All Out? Is it Double or Nothing? What's AEW's flagship event? And maybe down the line, All Out or Double or Nothing has the same prestige as a WrestleMania in an arena. And this may be, it would have to be 25 years down the line. But for right now, for a guy like MJF, if he grew up, we don't know his fan. I mean, the guy's always working when he's in an interview. I think I've seen one interview where he's not actually in character, and that was like when he was interviewed by Stone Cold, or someone taped him talking about going on the Broken Skull Sessions on his podcast, and he was marking out, talking about being in the same room as Steve Austin, and that was the one video footage I think I've seen of MJF acting not like the character MJF. Whether it be with Chris Van Vliet where he's eating his breakfast, or, breaking some guy's camera. Like, he is always in character, and he is next level. He's old school wrestling. He believes in kayfabe. He's just as old school as Dusty Rhodes wearing a cast when his leg wasn't broken. So MJF wants to bring the old school mentality of wrestling back. That being said,
at the pizzeria in Chicago last year, All Out in public.
There you go.
I didn't even say anything. I literally stood up like I was going to say something, and he shuts me down in perfect heel fashion. Like, he just does not break character. So I like that.
Yeah, and there's something to appreciate about that where, we see these guys, and again, we know the story is absolutely, well, here we got Rock'em Sock'em in here. Technically, too, he wasn't in character on the Rosie O'Donnell show. You're absolutely correct. He was a child singing You're My Sunshine. He'll never live that one down. Probably one of the cutest kids of all time on TV. So, but going back to Mike Belcaster's theory about this union between Punk and MJF, and now that we're sitting here kind of unpacking the main event and how could it be possible that Punk beats Moxley, I think we kind of wrote it ourselves right here. Taking Belcaster's idea about MJF and Punk teaming up, who's to say that MJF doesn't cost Moxley the title and give the title to Punk, and then you have the two of them standing tall at the end in Chicago. Cheers or boos, it doesn't matter. You build the rest of the story. He's going to get a reaction, positive reaction in the moment. What they do down the line, you can turn them both into uber heels and have them get, we saw Punk on the mic today. He has people in the palm of his hands. He can get them to react any way they want him to, whether they're upset or happy or pumped up. He can really be that surly dick and get people to be very angry at him very quickly. So him and MJF in a faction, fuck, man, I'm here for that.
No, I would totally be on board for that. And if that happens, though, obviously I don't think Punk and MJF would fight at Full Gear. It'd probably be Revolution. But I think that'd be good long storytelling from their allies from All Out through probably mid-January, and then in Revolution beginning of March. Am I wrong on that?
It's February, yeah, end of February, maybe early March, depends. Yeah.
So yeah, their allies, because MJF, he's one of those guys that he can't have allies for long. The Pinnacle didn't last very long, probably because it wasn't a good faction, but even if it was, MJF's more of a lone wolf to me. And I could see Punk being the same way, so it would make sense for them to be allies for, 3 or 4 months, eat that up, and then that obviously has to, because MJF's the next champion. Whoever wins it All Out will be champion until MJF takes the belt, is my prediction. And I don't think it would make sense for it to happen as soon as Full Gear. I think it would have to be Revolution, but I think that would be great long-term storytelling. MJF Punk together for 4 months, then they turn on each other. I'd say Punk has to be the babyface when they do go, because I don't ever want to see MJF as a babyface ever. Literally ever. So
they did it for a minute here in AEW where he was teaming with Cody and everybody knew the writing was on the wall. He was going to be turning on Cody and everyone was so pumped when he actually turned, but he was a horrible babyface, you're right. I think they could pull it off if they had him have that Stone Cold, fuck everybody type of mentality where he's not going to change who he is. You could cheer him if you want, but he's not going to pander to you. I think you could have this anti-hero, and we saw the promo. It was very Punk-like. Where Punk in 2000, whatever, where he cut that pipe bomb, it was very similar to him, where he was saying, fuck the establishment, and people were cheering for him. The only difference is AEW is not WWE. You know, you don't have the establishment that the infrastructure that was WWE is what kind of fueled CM Punk's rage and anger towards the company. AEW is supposed to be this babyface company that's giving everybody what they want. So that's why the MJF ire is a little bit misplaced, in my opinion. They're going to have to do a lot of unpacking, figuring that out to make it work and for it to make sense, I think.
Yeah, like to me, that storyline of doing kind of being pissed off at the man AEW, that storyline would work better for me for like Hangman or something, who it makes like he's legitimately been a top guy, people love him, and then AEW puts him on the back burner. Then you could start blurring the lines. But that's going to be tough with MJF because he's been featured the whole time I've been watching in the best storylines, main events, you know. So, yeah, it would be – and Punk also, it would be tough for him to take that role. Although Punk, in general, is kind of a baby. Even the promos he cuts, to me, it's almost like, woe is me, the world's always out to get me. It's like, no, dude. It's not. You're just kind of an asshole. And the whole, like, backstage drama you hear surrounding Punk, like, you could see just in his character on screen how he could be an asshole backstage. Like, he thinks he's king shit at Turd Mountain, basically. So when I hear the rumblings of, like, drama backstage, people like, is it a work? Is it a shoot? Whatever. Some of it, I think it's a good blend. Because right now, if I was in the back, I would be frustrated. Pretty much everyone has a case to be frustrated in the back, right? Like, legitimately, just from my point of view as a fan watching Dynamite and seeing how people are used, it's not far-fetched that there's drama backstage, and mainly could be caused by Punk inadvertently, because it's one of those things like wrestlers could be bitter with Punk, not because Punk's did anything to them, because they saw when he came, like, the company shifted, because once All Out last year was a pivot point for the company. Completely different product now than the Dynamite before All Out last year. AEW's completely different product. The vibe's different, the roster's different, everything's fucking different. And so I could see where if you were an original with AEW, Punk comes in, and not only is he taking the spotlight, like he's completely changed the whole vibe of AEW.
Yeah, they went from grassroots hamburger shop to borderline Burger King to WWE's McDonald's. Like, they went fully leaning into the full stars. And what was the word is grassroots, with guys like Darby Allin, guys like MJF, Jungle Boy being pushed to the moon. It felt like an alternative to, yes, we love our stars, but they're creating their own. And that's what AEW had from those years. I think if we all say that the best storytelling probably happened 2019, 2020, and early 2021, we would all say it's because they were leaning on the talent that was in-house, not trying to sort of fit in and shoehorn all these guys from the outside. And I love Bryan Danielson. It's my favorite wrestler on the planet right now, maybe of all time. I love him. But when you get all these guys in the ring, somebody else has to drop out. And that's when guys like Ricky Starks, guys like Jungle Boy, guys like Darby Allin now, he is going to be, for perpetual time, he's going to be involved in these party 6-man tag matches with Sting. Every single pay-per-view. When was the last time he had a meaningful match outside of the Brody King match? That was the match that should be on pay-per-view. But now we have the 6-man tag match. It's rinse repeat. It's the same spot. Sting does a spot off the rafters. You still got it. Darby does some crazy fucking spot. Darby should be in a main feud at this point. He's the guy. You want to talk about cornerstones of the company? That's a guy who gets put on the back burner who has a legitimate gripe with all these new guys coming in. And it may not be intentional, you know what I mean? Like, it's not directed at Punk. It's because of the fact that this guy comes in, someone gets pushed down the card.
Yeah, I do think that we're getting ready to see a Sting-Darby feud, though, that's going to push story. I wouldn't be shocked to see Darby and Sting fighting at Full Gear, because you got the slow turn. Like, if you notice, Sting's paint on his face is the same shit that was happening to Julie Hart, like,
yep,
turning type shit. And the Darby Sting thing's played out. They can't do anything more with that. That's a good storyline to turn Sting heel or Darby heel. I mean, I don't think you could make Darby heel. I think the crowd's too much behind him, but I do think you could definitely turn Sting heel. So I wouldn't mind seeing that feud. But yeah, he's been put on the back burner, but that would bring him back. And I feel the same about Orange Cassidy.
Yeah,
and I'm
he's
not
another
a
guy.
huge, like, I like Orange Cassidy. I think to really make it in wrestling, you have to be a mic guy. So I think eventually his character is going to have to shift and he's going to have to start fucking talking, or he's always going to get pushed to the back. But little kids are showing up to the arena dressed like Orange Cassidy. So, and little kids are just showing up to wrestling pissed off because they don't get to see their favorite wrestler. And it's inexplicable because today wrestlers get the push because of their in-ring skills, even though I like the mic and storytelling better. There's not a whole lot of people in wrestling more exciting in the ring than Orange Cassidy. I remember that three-way match at Double or Nothing, and the year was in Jacksonville, the one we went to, me and the Chads went to. That three-way match with him, Omega, and
It was Pac, yeah.
Pac. Fucking great match because of the in-ring shit. So it's people like Darby and Orange Cassidy that not only built the company, like, they're fan favorites. It's not like they fell out of favor with the fan base. AEW put them on the back burner and shit. And like Orange Cassidy takes a bunch of losses, and me and the Chads go back and forth because they're always like, wins and losses don't matter in wrestling. And I see that point, but at the same time, they do when you're trying to push someone. And I feel the same way like with Kingston. Like Kingston's just taking L after fucking L after fucking L. Like they do matter to it. They only don't matter if they get wins and losses. But if you get like 3 losses in a row, to me that starts to matter.
Especially when they're separated over the course of 4 or 5 weeks where, yeah, losing doesn't really hurt if you're on TV being focused every week. But if every time someone sees you, you're in a losing effort, like an Eddie Kingston. I know there was actual real life stuff in the back where he was suspended for like legitimately fighting Sammy Guevara. So we didn't even talk about that last week, but that's part of the chaos that Tony Khan can't keep everybody corralled. But yeah, Eddie Kingston got a big win over Jericho, and then what else did he do? Like he beat Jericho on pay-per-view, and then that was really it. So where do you go with Eddie Kingston? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's where they kind of put themselves in a spot where what else is next if the world championship is not attainable for some of these characters? And I think at the end of the day, if it's not, then what are we doing with these main guys?
Yeah, I'm with you. I have no idea what they're doing. I just know that I like a lot of the OG guys in AEW. Like I like Orange Cassidy over Kyle O'Reilly. I like Darby Allin over Daniel Garcia. Who else did we mention who's getting on the back burner? Who I don't know. And it's even people like Wheeler Yuta. I like Wheeler Yuta. I'm not shitting on him at all. But like he's another one of those guys. Like you give him a push, and then you stop because he got a huge push then disappeared. I think he went over to maybe New Japan and wrestled.
He was wrestling in New Japan for a minute. Yeah,
like. It's all these little guys that they're pushing over Darby and Orange, but then not seeing it through. I think that's the big storyline with AEW is they're just not good at seeing things through.
Yeah, what's going on, young Anthony?
Gentlemen, how's it going?
Tony No Pussy joins us.
Slim Balls is here. What's going on, folks?
Oh, just talking about wrestling.
Well, talking about wrestling. What are we talking about on this evening?
Well, we're about to jump into the main event here, just talking about the Elite versus the United Empire. So, how about you take the lead? What were your thoughts about this match? I thought this match was one of the better main events we've seen on Dynamite in all of 2022. Will Ospreay continues to impress me to a point where he needs to be full-time in AEW in their main event scene. I know we're talking about a bloated roster. Someone else can go. I don't know who it is, but we need Will Ospreay full-time in America.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great match. You knew what you were going to get with this match. Like, you knew it was just going to be great. I thought we saw a really good Kenny tonight. That was my main takeaway. I think he took a lot more damage than last 2 weeks ago now. So I thought he looked great. Yeah, I mean, there's not much that you could say about it because you knew what you were what you were getting, like before it even happened. The result was pretty predictable, but I think it needed to be that way because obviously you're not going to have a New Japan group go in and fight for your tag titles, although it would have made things a little more interesting. But yeah, I thought it was just a really, really great match.
All right, so we touched a lot about Moxley and Punk, and you've been very critical about how Mox and Punk has been built, or the lack of build we should talk about. Do you think that they tied a couple of the loose ends up enough for it to make sense? Or are you still like, nah, this is bullshit. I'm not looking forward to the match.
So like, I think there is a story there, especially after tonight. I feel like the main issue was just the fact that there was no story. It wasn't an issue of it being a bad or a good one, but like there was just nothing to work with. Like we got the crazy 3-minute match last week, and obviously they were going to build to something. So we were just waiting on what the exact build up to Mox and Punk was going to be. Because if it didn't have to do with MJF, I really didn't know what else they would do with Mox. So it seemed pretty like apparent that it would be Punk and Mox number 2. Although I don't agree with it, because just booking wise, if Mox beats him in 3 minutes clean, why would we get now a 30-minute match between the two? You go from a clean win to a competitive match. You can make the argument of the injury, but still, it was a pretty decisive finish to me. I think when you're talking about tonight, it feels like a story that they should have stretched out over a longer period of time. Like if you wanted to present Punk as this guy who like, is down on his luck, like it's not the old CM Punk. Like I feel like you needed to build to that. And you could have just moved this story to another pay-per-view if you really needed to tell that specific type of story for it. But you can't do it in 2 weeks. Like obviously Punk loses in 3 minutes. Yeah, he's not the CM Punk that we've been seeing over the last year. But that's one match, and he was off of an injury. Like now he comes back and he's saying, I'm not the Punk that I used to be. And his trainer that we haven't seen before all of a sudden comes out and, snaps him out of it. I feel like it's a good story, but it's just too quick. Like this is the most, I feel like this is another side of Punk that we haven't seen before. Like, him kind of doubting himself, at least in AEW, we haven't seen it. So the fact that they're rushing this type of angle and this type of character arc for him, I think it's just a missed opportunity. I feel like you could have stretched this out over a longer period of time.
Completely agree. I said the same thing.
I got a question. So was this the first time we've seen that trainer ever? Like nobody knew who he was till tonight? Because I thought it was just me not watching WWE that I didn't know who the fuck it was.
No, it's not from WWE. He's been in backstage segments. He's been producing things. Like he'd come out when there's like a scuffle. Like if Ace Steel historically, like he's been in Punk documentaries. So they made sure to emphasize it on the show. So Ace Steel is a guy.
You guys knew who he was. Like as soon as you saw him,
I knew who he was. Yeah, but
I knew him by face. I didn't know his association with Punk.
Oh, so that even makes it more lame to me then. Kinda. I mean, seriously, it's like it'd be one thing. Because they kept talking about him like he was from. Like I said, I don't know Punk from WWE. It made it sound like that everybody would know who the fuck this guy was, and now it turns out no, it's actually just another random guy that they bring down to cut a promo. Cool.
So, Anthony, to your point about the build, the other thing, of course, I agree with the abbreviation of the build being not efficient and as far as stretching the story out, but also Punk is almost telling the exact same story as the MJF stuff and the Omega stuff in cohesion at the same exact time. Like he's overcoming the odds and these injuries, and also we have the work shoot stuff going on in the background. That's what I was talking about with Hawk before. AEW needs to be this immersive universe where everything ties into each other. You can't have things happening on little islands around each other. It doesn't have the same effect. When Omega is trying to overcome injuries, but all the tape on his shoulders, he's wearing the shirt, is he the same? And we're getting the same in the main event for the world title picture. Same thing with MJF. It just happened in May. Now we're doing, is it a work? Is it a shoot? Is he mad at the company? Is he leaving? So all that sort of takes away from the build. If this was done in a separate year, maybe a year from now, or by itself, we may have a completely different feeling about this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you can make the argument about like all of the backstage stuff. You can make the argument that maybe this put pressure on them to kind of rush a story or do something out of the ordinary. For me, I just feel like, you could add as many people to the roster as you want to. Like tonight, they added W. Morrissey or, whatever his name is, Big Cass. You could add as many people. You could sign Will Ospreay, which I know could be a really good addition to the roster. But until you start seeing the consistent storytelling, like I think AEW was at its best last summer, where you had all those great stories with MJF and and Jericho with the 5 labors or however labors there were, and Punk comes in, and you have all the stuff with Kenny, and like that was a really great era of just consistent storytelling because it was long, stories that ended all at whatever pay-per-view, All Out, or whatever event happened.
Full Gear was the Hangman and the Kenny story, which was building for like over the course of 2 years. So we had a couple of really long-term stories that were culminated in great ways, very satisfying conclusions. And now we're getting very microwavable type of booking right now where CM Punk and Moxley is being built in 4 weeks and we're getting the return match after a week. This should have been done over the course of, to your point, 6 weeks. Like, have the match 6 weeks ago and then have it again now. Like, he's been training, do the vignettes, working towards it.
Like a few more weeks, and I'm talking, like you said, 6 weeks, I feel like that's more than enough time. And I get like Punk with the injury and everything, but if that's the case, then just do Punk and Mox straight up at All Out and don't even worry about doing the match on Dynamite. I feel like you could have told a much better story if you wanted to stretch it out to the next event or whatever special event they have after All Out. Be my guest and do that. But I feel like it was such a bad decision to go ahead and just take what could have been a long story of a different side of CM Punk and just shorten it to 4 weeks. Another thing I'll say is I think looking at each pay-per-view that we've seen so far for AEW, at least in recent history, I would say over the last year and a half, I feel like this is the first event that you're not seeing a long story kind of culminate here. I guess Christian and Jungle Boy could be that type of story, but like they dropped the ball on it, so I don't really consider that. But like, you have your Omega and, you've had your Omega Page, you've had your MJF Punk, you've had your Jericho, and you name it. He's had so many long stories with everyone. This is the first time I feel like you don't have that long story. And I feel like partially for that is because we still have the Elite all together. I think you're at the point where you need to start separating them. Like, we're going into All Out. We're again going to have Page, Omega, and the Bucks in the same match. I get that they're always going to be associated at the hip, or whatever the phrase is. But it's time that you need to start separating these guys. Because if you just keep them all together for all of AEW or as long as you can, it's going to get old. And for me right now, it's getting old. Like, I get Adam Page, being the third man is a great little scenario. So now we see Page and Omega again. But, like, we've seen this already. Like, give me some other stories of, Adam Page going against a Miro or Omega going against anyone else because it's Kenny Omega. Like, I feel like there are so many other stories that we could be seeing, but the fact that we have this being the Elite kind of world separate from everything else, it feels like you said, like they're on an island on their own. And until they get off that island, like, it's going to be hard for me to really get invested in what the Elite are doing.
Well, that was the frustrating part. I mean, Hawk, I can imagine you're not watching Being the Elite from the first episode on. So they just like throw in knowledge that we're supposed to know about the history between Adam Cole and Kenny Omega and about the history with Cody and Hangman and everything that goes in that world. They make assumptions about the casual fan where they should really spell it out for us. And if you want to tell those stories, tell them on TV, not on YouTube.
Yeah, I think that we're getting ready to get well, it's weird because you say break up the Bucks and Omega. They're going to be together while they feud with Adam Cole and who was it, 2.0? Is that the name of the tag team? Or
Fish and O'Reilly?
What are their
Red
names?
Dragon.
Red Dragon.
Who's 2.0? Isn't there a tag team 2.0 or some bullshit?
2.0
Yeah, they're in JAS
Jericho
now.
Appreciation
Yeah.
Society.
Anyway, who is Red Dragon?
Yeah.
They're going to feud. Red Dragon and Adam Cole versus Omega and the Bucks, where that's going to happen, which I'm fine with, and hopefully that'll kind of the allegiances might end different, like Omega and Cole might be together in the Bucks, and you never know how that's going to end, but I think the Elite's getting ready to play itself out, and then that storyline will culminate with the Elite probably completely disbanding. So I think you're going to get your wish on that, and I agree. Like, it's definitely played out. All the factions that AEW started with are played out. Inner Circle's already debunked. They're already gone. Pinnacle's already gone. For some inexplicable reason, Dark Order's still around, which is insane to me because they're the worst part of AEW. And I made the point, I think that even if Brody Lee didn't die, I think Dark Order would have already dissolved. because storylines play, they play out and then they fade away and you stop caring like we do with the Elite. So the fact that they're still around now, even with Brody gone, is just kind of mind bending to me. So I'm with you as far as seeing fresh shit,
Yeah.
people we haven't seen. Miro with anybody, because he's another one of those guys that I think I like that they've kind of just shit the bed with, who they're just not sure what to do. But yeah, I'm with you. Fresh storylines, new factions, fucking like almost a reset button for AEW. And I think After All Out is a perfect time to hit that reset button.
Yeah,
like you
it has
should
to
be
be.
deciding
It's much
right
needed.
now, like who are the 20 wrestlers you're featuring between now and Full Gear? Who's the 20 to 30 guys that are featured, and just go with it. Yeah, there's going to be people in the locker room angry that they're not on Dynamite for 3 months, but the fans are going to be happy.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just like ridiculous how, that comment that Tony made today, that he was like, after All Out, this is going to be the best our roster's ever been. Now, I don't know what he's talking about as far as, if they're adding new names to the roster, if there's, other people coming back, or maybe it could be kind of alluding to the backstage environment, because he did say it's going to be the strongest the roster has ever been. Maybe he means like strong as far as like, them being connected. You could also take it as that. But like, it's not the issue of the roster being the best and the strongest that we've ever seen, because the roster's been strong ever since the start of AEW. Like, this is this is the alternative to the WWE. You're getting guys that you wouldn't see on the other company. And now they gradually brought in a lot of those WWE guys that didn't get the fair shot in the WWE. And by last year, by All Out, you had probably the best roster in all of wrestling. And I would still argue that they're the best roster on paper. Now just becomes the fact of you're not doing a lot with this huge roster. They have to have at least 150 guys on that roster that they present in and out on a weekly basis throughout, the build up to a pay-per-view. And, it's like I said, it's just not the issue of having the names. You have them already. But like you said, pick your 20 guys that you want to build towards Full Gear. Pick those guys, present them well, give them the hype, and don't just keep doing the same thing. And I saw it tonight as well. Tony Khan says this is going to be the best go-home show that he's ever been a part of. It felt like a regular episode of Dynamite to me. And that's not a bad thing for the most part, because you got a great main event, you had some really good promos, but it felt like the same thing. You see the wingmen on tonight. Like, you get these random like a squash match with Wardlow and FTR. Like, it's the same stuff that we're getting. So I'm hoping that after All Out, instead of it being the biggest and strongest that the roster has been, just give better storylines to the guys that you haven't been giving anything to. House of Black, Miro, Darby, Orange Cassidy. Like, push those guys. They've been with you for a while. People are behind them. Just fucking go for it. Like, don't keep giving us the same stuff and the same formula for every show.
You mentioned alternative, Anthony, and I think a lot of that's changing, because if we watch the way Triple H booked NXT Black and Gold, there's a lot of similarities to what AEW became. That was the alternative to WWE at that time, and why it was a thriving entity and selling out the Barclays Center on SummerSlam weekend and selling out buildings during WrestleMania weekend is because there was a market for that type of wrestling. And now with Triple H at the helm, of course he can't go full in on that indie style and push those guys, but he can definitely sprinkle it in by highlighting guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and making them the highlight of your show instead of leaning on those guys like Omos and the guys that Vince was fond of. I think that's also sort of, and I'm not saying in Tony Khan's head, but it definitely blurs the line of what kind of fan people, what kind of fans are going to be watching your product. Because now the line is like, you got AEW fans that aren't going to strictly just watch AEW, because you're getting a lot of the same on both. And sometimes now it's going to come down to who's the better character, what's the better story. And right now, one company's telling a better story than the other. And that's not to say it's not going to be the same 3 weeks from now. We saw Chad say it. It's very fickle. Fans are fickle. People that are riding Triple H right now and saying all good things about him could be ripping on him if he makes one wrong move. Say he brings Braun Strowman back like the rumors say he's going to bring him back. People may say that's not the move they wanted. But right now, Triple H is batting 1,000 with everything he's doing, and he's the golden boy right now. Tony Khan got nothing but praise for the first 2.5 years. No one said a bad thing about Tony Khan unless, people were saying in the shadows. Now it's like out there, and it's well deserved. There's a lot of things that need to be criticized. But my point is, WWE and AEW, there's going to be a lot of crossover as far as what you're getting on a weekly basis, and you couldn't say that 2 years ago. They were strictly different products.
Yeah, good point.
And did you guys notice the guy holding the sign in the front row that said "Just enjoy wrestling"?
Yeah, I enjoy that.
And I don't do a lot of, I'll Google AEW maybe once a week just to see what's going on. So, but I don't know, I'm not on the forums like Sneed is and whatnot. So I'm guessing for him to carry that sign, he's on, and that's basically what you're hearing on the internet is AEW is just sinking right now. So he's making the sign hey guys, just enjoy it. But I push back on that a little bit because it's yeah, just enjoy it, but it has to be enjoyable. You can't, if that's not an emotion that you can just I'm going to enjoy this regardless. It's no, if you're watching it and you're having a good time organically, you're going to enjoy it. But it's not something, you can't force yourself to just enjoy wrestling. So
there's a conversation to be had about, I think Jericho said it weekly, and this is he didn't make this line up, but no one hates wrestling more than wrestling fans. Same thing with Star Wars. No one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. We are the most critical of this entertainment we find ourselves being, sucked into on a weekly basis. So yeah, I agree with that. And the tribalism has no place in wrestling. People that want to die in the sword for WWE and also die in the sword for AEW, and one can't do anything wrong. That's bullshit. But to not be able to be critical of the product, I agree with you, Hawk. There's a middle ground somewhere. We can definitely be critical of what's wrong with the product because we know how much better it can be. We just saw it a couple months ago. It was better.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the complaints, is people have seen the high points of wrestling. It'd be one thing if we're oh man, I want to experience good wrestling one time, No one's saying that they have. And that's why the bar is set. And when you're not reaching it, it's clear as day. Because Tony No Pussy was saying, last summer was the best story. I'm with him. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. I say that on the flagship all the time. Last summer was AEW's peak. We've seen it. And it's the same, they had the same guys who made it great. So it's all there. Mm-hmm. It's just, at this point, I just think it's Tony Khan. And I think he's just added too many people too quickly. And he's pushed a lot of people into the back burner that didn't need to be pushed back. And then in the process, he's created some animosity that may have the product suffering. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into it, but at the end of the day, Tony Khan's the ultimate decision maker. So it all does go on him. And like you said, he was the golden boy for 2 years. And now he's not. And he's he's struggling. What can I do? What can I do? Oh, let me give him Punk Mox every single week now. It's no, we don't want that. We'd rather have fucking Miro Punk. Or so fucking even Mox Will Ospreay even. I don't give a shit. Something new.
Yeah, right. Just new anything. Ace, you mentioned the Triple H regime and how everyone is, kind of riding off of this momentum. And I mentioned it in the chat, and it's you can make the argument of Triple H bringing in all these former WWE guys, bringing them back, and everyone, being crazy. Oh, Gargano's back and Karrion Kross and all that. But the fact is, what separates Tony Khan from Triple H right now is that level of storytelling. You look at the Clash of the Castle card, Triple H built that card in 5 weeks, mind you, with only one person that he returned back to WWE in Dakota Kai. Meanwhile, you're talking about All Out. Tony Khan has had, 2 to 3 months to build to the show, and he's only now building it in the last few weeks. And still, we don't have a confirmed card yet. I'm sure they're going to add another match or another pre-show match on Rampage. I feel like my original point was going to be, when it comes to Triple H, I feel like this is almost a blessing in disguise for Tony Khan to have Triple H, take WWE and turn it into what it is right now. Because, you're getting the rumors of, guys wanting out and, requesting their release. I know it's not confirmed, but there was a rumor that Malachi Black wanted his release.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, if I'm Tony Khan, start granting some of these guys their release. Like, if you're not going to do anything with him, it's not the fact of seeing them flourish in other companies and, wanting him for yourself. Let the guys elsewhere, because it's only going to help you to focus on the guys that you want and that you'll keep pushing. If you're not going to do anything with Malachi Black or Miro or Orange Cassidy or Ethan Page or any of those guys, just let them go to other companies, not for their sake or not for the sake of the WWE, but for your own sake, so that you can focus on getting that storytelling back to where it was in the summer of 2021 or whatever you think the best time period of AEW was, where it was a little bit more of a concise roster and you had your top names that you would see on a weekly basis being built up. Nowadays, you have a million people that you need to build up, and they can't even do it on the however many hours of programming they have throughout the week with their 4 shows. So let them go elsewhere. Let them flourish. If they want to leave, let Triple H do whatever they want with them. And I'm sure they will be happy with the creative freedom that's been opened up in the WWE. Now, this is only a positive for Tony Khan to focus on the guys that he has.
I completely agree. And I think the way to leave this, and I'm going to play the drop for the main event, even though we didn't do top 3, I'll read you guys the card. And then I have an early flight to catch and got to get out of here. And I know that the Chads will cover this in more depth. You guys can get it tomorrow morning to talk every detail they're going to cover segment by segment. I know Hawk's waiting for the call from the Chads at any time now. But let Mark Henry lead us into the card.
It's time for the main event.
All right, so the card we have in front of us, I have it right here. The pre-show, what they're calling the All-Out 0 Hour, has 3 matches thus far. We have Eddie Kingston versus Tomohiro Ishii. We have the AEW All-Atlantic Championship, which was a hot topic discussion that we had here, is on the pre-show at All Out. Pac versus Kip Sabian. And then we have Hook versus Angelo Parker. It's unclear if the FTW Championship's on the line, but that's the match that's happening. As far as the real card goes, BRYAN DANIELSON versus Chris Jericho. We have the Fatal 4-Way for the AEW Women's World Championship. Toni Storm versus Britt Baker versus Hikaru Shida versus Jamie Hayter. We have, inexplicably, there's 3 trios matches. This is the first of them. Miro, Darby, and Sting versus the House of Black. We have the TBS Championship, Jade Cargill versus Athena. Jungle Boy versus Christian Cage. Another trios match, FTR and Wardlow versus Jay Lethal and the Motor City Machine Guns. Don't get me wrong, both those matches are going to bang. Casino ladder match. We have a mystery person in there. It doesn't look like anyone really strikes me as the person that could win it. Like Penta's in it, Rey Fenix is in it, Andrade's in it. We talked about maybe it could be MJF. I'm not sure if that's the spot that you'd want him to come back. I know Hawk said no, but I don't know. They may pull that off. We also have Ricky Starks versus Powerhouse Hobbs. We have the Trios Championship Tournament Finals, which is almost guaranteed to be the Dark Order with Hangman Page versus the Elite. And of course, Swerve in Our Glory versus the Acclaim for the tag titles. And main eventing, the AEW World Championship, CM Punk, fresh off his foot injury, versus the dominant, the purveyor of violence, the undisputed AEW World Champion, Jon Moxley. So, long card. It's going to be a long show. Going to strap in wherever we are watching this, but it took a while, a windy road, but we got there. We have a full card in front of us.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could put together a full card, but it's how we got here that is concerning to me, is only because it was half those matches, like, I didn't even know those matches were on the card until you just ran through them. Because there wasn't anything leading up to it, you know? And I'm not a Trios fan at all. I think the Trios titles are stupid. I think it's another stupid... Because I mock AEW for all their prizes, but it's becoming an issue. Like, seriously, like, when I was watching wrestling growing up, there was no Trios titles. Does WWE have Trios titles?
No, but they could have back in the day with the Shield and the Wyatt family. They could have done it.
But no, they don't, because the Trios titles is stupid. It's just, it's really going to be tough to build. They haven't built any story around this tournament at all, and so now you got to think you have these Trios titles floating around AEW. So now we're going to start getting these storylines of like 9 people deep for these trios. You're going to have like this team versus, and I don't know. It's going to be a bit much for me. And then you got, like, what's the title Pac has right now?
The All-Atlantic Championships on the pre-show.
Yeah, like, nobody gives a shit about that belt. Like, it's stuff like that I think has hurt AEW, is Tony Khan's been adding belts and been adding people, and he thinks that that's story. It's like, no, man. Just put the people you already have in the ring together, and doesn't always have to be a fucking prize involved. And I think that's why AEW's been suffering. They've been adding too many belts.
Yeah, I compare this show and the build-up to it. It's like driving to Disney World in a thunderstorm. Like, it's a horrible ride. It's long and it's tiring and it's just awful. But at least you're getting to Disney World and it's going to be a great time. This is what the build to All Out has been. It's been long. It feels like nothing is happening. And for the most part, it's been a shit show. But you know that All Out's going to be a fantastic show nonetheless. Like, you look at the card, Mox, Punk, the trio shit, all of that's going to be like superb matches. But then you like really analyze the card and like you're listening to what Ace is saying. And it's like the All Atlantic Championship is on the pre-show. After we went through this whole thing at Forbidden Door to get this title in, you want to put it on the pre-show with a guy that's been, in the crowd for a year with a box on his head. And then you have 3 trios matches, 2 of them which mean practically nothing. And then you have Mox and Punk for the second time, another interim championship. Like, it's going to be a great show. We're going to come out of this saying this is probably the show of the year, as we always do with the AEW pay-per-views. But it's not the issue of the show, as we've been saying for the longest time. It's how we get there. Don't forget, AEW isn't just a pay-per-view company. If they want to be, by all means, go the New Japan route and just have your shows every few months, or if you want to do tours, whatever it may be. If you don't want to, put the effort into the TV, but it's not the issue of the events. It's how we get there. And every time it just feels like driving to Disney in a thunderstorm.
I'm with you.
So with that being said,
every week, and I want my week-to-week Dynamites to be enjoyable. The pay-per-view should just be icing on the cake. It's like, sweet, now we get a pay-per-view instead of like, all right, at least the pay-per-view's here, so we're going to get some good shit.
Yeah.
We do a weekly podcast, not a every fucking 3-month podcast. So give me something week to week.
I'll give you something. Let's go to the turnbuckletavern.com to get all your needs, all your merch, everything you want from turnbuckletavern.com. We have a whole bunch of shows. We got Long Balls, a fantasy football NFL show. We also got the Raw Down, which both these guys are the head of. Hawk, I'll start with you. Give me something to look forward to for the week. What do we have to look forward to on Long Balls? And what's going on in Call the Hawk? What are you giving the Chads this week? Don't spoil too much, though.
I'm going to give him a bunch of shit for being dumb, is what I'm going to give him on Call the Hawk like I do every week. And then Long Balls next Tuesday is the first official weekly show where we preview the week. We'll give our predictions for the week. So tune in. It's going to be the first real show with the real format. So it should be interesting.
Awesome, man. And Young Anthony, what's going on the Raw Down and what's going on in your universe with the Independent Epicenter? I saw the Invictus video you dropped. That was awesome.
Thank you. I'm going to give Marco and J-Bone a bunch of shit for being dumb next week, and I'm going to retain my Raw Down championship for successfully predicting Clash at the Castle. You will see that next week. Next Thursday, at our new start time, 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. We have Before Our Time this week, WrestleMania 8.
Ooh, I was there.
That's Hawk's show, so I'm sure he'll be tuning into that one. And yeah, Independent Epicenter, Invictus Pro Wrestling just had a great show. Let Them Fight Summer Wars. I did some interviews there. So, promos, all that cool stuff. And they're going to have a great show September 25th. That is their anniversary show. And Speedball Mike Bailey is going to be on the card. You have Darius Carter versus, I should know who it is. Ken Broadway. He's going to be on the card. Some fucking great championship matches. So if you're in the New York, New Jersey area, definitely check out that show because support independent wrestling.
Hell yeah, support independent wrestling and support the Turnbuckle Tavern, guys. Stay tuned to the social media on the Turnbuckle Tavern and also mine at ACEFIELD Retro, at Mike BELCASTER, at Pastor Hawk, at OG Fig Kid. We'll be in Chicago checking all out. If you see us, we got stickers for you. Say hi. You know that Mike's going to be wearing that Turnbuckle Tavern hat. I may be wearing a Shaw Nostalgia shirt. I think I'm wearing that to the show. But say hi to us. But I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the AEW Wrap Show. Get your fix tomorrow with the Turnbuckle Tavern flagship. They have more info for you guys. We'll see what they felt about the Go Home Show and if they were able to right the ship. But as Tom would say, peace, love, and pro wrestling. We'll see you guys next week.